Africa.
Reflect on the unprecedented uncertainties and vulnerabilities that are likely to constrain our journey to shared prosperity. Democracy is under pressure, and emerging threats including climate change, generative artificial intelligence, and escalating conflicts are reshaping the global landscape. The challenges facing Africa are compounded by rising unemployment, geopolitical tensions, democratic backsliding across Africa. These factors have fueled grievances among our youthful population, leading to street protests demanding greater accountability from their leaders. Yet even during these challenging times, the Open Government Partnership remains resilient. It offers a unique platform to strengthen democracy, improve transparency, and ensure accountability in serving both people and the planet. By focusing on collaboration among governments, civil society, and citizens, Open Government Partnership shows that democracy is humanity's best hope for inclusivity and fair service delivery. This roundtable serves as an invaluable opportunity for us to share experiences on how we can better rebuild trust through open governance. The meeting is structured to explore the emerging trends, confront shared challenges, identify opportunities for a brighter collective future through meaningful dialogue and leveraging on each other's wisdom. I believe that the outcomes of our dialogue will deepen democracy and raise awareness on how much we can do to effectively meet the aspirations of our citizens. Let us engage openly and candidly during these discussions in the spirit of the Chatham House rules. Our Kenyan delegation looks forward to sharing its journey in building a robust, inclusive, multi-stakeholder forum, expanding civic space, and resolving crisis through trust. We also eagerly look forward to learning from your insights on navigating resilience in open government initiatives. I therefore wish you fruitful deliberations and look forward to the outcomes of the meeting. Finally, let me take this opportunity to invite you later on to explore our tourist and cultural attractions, particularly if you are visiting Kenya for the first time. Be assured of a great experience in Nairobi, the only city with a national park, which is part of what makes Kenya truly magical. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is now my singular pleasure to declare this roundtable officially open. May it inspire renewed energy and actionable solutions to further the cause of open government across our regions. Asante sana. So maybe if you will allow, I'll just try and pick two issues or three that I think would be very, very critical for conversation. In Kenya, the whole issue of being open is now a constitutional requirement. We cannot undertake any piece of legislation. We cannot push any policy position. We cannot even take up a development program without public participation. So there's no way any public institution, and indeed even the private sector, can just wake up and ambush a region or ambush a community with a program, with a project. It's not allowed. our constitution is very specific that you must have public participation, which means you must talk to the people, you must engage, you must disclose what you intend to do, and you must allow them to have an input and a say in what you intend to do. Now, that has also come with its own challenges. And this is perhaps where I want to pitch, so that as we reflect on some of these things, we can also try and see how to balance development, which you might call accelerated development, while at the same time making sure that your citizenry are part and parcel of that process. Let me give you a very specific example because I'm grappling with it as we speak. In government, we have the Department of Parliamentary Affairs. That is part of our structure. And it falls within my docket as the Prime Cabinet Secretary. Now I'm not talking about my role as Foreign Affairs, but as Prime Cabinet Secretary. Now, one of the things that we have scoped and mapped out is that to effect a robust reform agenda, each ministry was asked to give its priorities, especially the legislative agenda. And we have a record of over 700 pieces of legislation that require either amendment or require fresh legislation. 700. That means even if you have the most efficient parliament or county assembly, you have to figure out how fast or how long it would take for them to do 700 pieces of legislation. And we have seen situations where if you have not had public participation, that legislation is declared unconstitutional and it's thrown out by our courts, and it has happened. Okay? So we have learned the bitter way through practical motions and examples. So everybody now must make sure that you're doing public participation. Otherwise, the courts will declare that law unconstitutional until you have gone through that motion. But here is the catch. We also asked the ministries, just give us an estimate. What would it cost you to go through the process and have your public participation? Because the government itself, the originating ministry or department, is required to undertake public participation, whether it is stakeholder engagement or whatever it is, whatever semantics you may use, but it is public participation, perhaps to develop the policy. Then you go through public participation to develop the piece of legislation. Then you submit it to Parliament, and Parliament again is mandated but also obligated to do public participation. Then after you've done the piece of legislation, there are statutory instruments, that is the subsidiary legislation. Then to do the subsidiary legislation, you must again do public participation. So I told them, just tell us, what do you think it would cost? According to this, by rule of thumb, the lowest process, that came up was it would cost 10 million shillings to go through a public participation. There are others, some kind of bills whose nature requires you to do even more in terms of public participation. And the departments were giving us figures of 50 million to 100 million to go through the full hog. 700 pieces of legislation multiplied by 10 million alone at the lowest is about 7 billion shillings. I know democracy is expensive and it's the best mode, but you tell me, if public participation is going to cost a government at the lowest something like 7 billion, how do you reconcile this between doing public participation and supplying drugs in a hospital? How do you reconcile this between building a bridge or a hospital and doing public participation? So in the whole framework of open government, we are now faced with a situation where the principle is correct, but did we factor in the cost? So our constitution has now saddled us with a process. But who pays? It's the taxpayer. It's the ordinary citizen. The person who needs the road, the person who needs the medicine in hospital, instead of getting the medicine in hospital, is getting politicians in their village who are doing public participation. So, perhaps in this conversation, we now need to reopen a debate here, a broader debate, that in the whole philosophy, particularly in the context of Kenya, should we develop a rational ceiling? Do we have some parameters that can now be properly built into a piece of legislation so that we don't spend taxpayers' money talking as opposed to delivering service? Yet we must also make sure that they are part of what we are doing, because you also don't want to impose things that they don't want. So this is a contradiction that requires, and it's a debate that we need to take up, not just in Kenya but across. Do you have to have, for instance, what would be wrong if you merged public participation during the legislation and the statutory instruments? Why must they be separate? It's the same law. Why do we have to have the process twice or thrice? Okay. So I thought this should be okay for a conversation, because if we are not careful, what about in the judiciary, institutions that are supposed to be independent? Would you then now start calling for public participation before a judgment is delivered in a court of law? So we need to perhaps start putting rationale to this space. But it's important. I'm not saying that we should not have that frankness and whatever. I was just saying it's a constitutional requirement for us, but we need to rationalize it. I don't know what the experience is in other countries. The other thing that I just want to point out is that it is good for accountability. Then we need to look at conflict. one of the excuses I had given, because I think I was supposed to have joined you yesterday, or is it earlier today? And I said I was not sure because under IGAD, I was supposed to be part of a team going to Juba, because the crisis is escalating again in South Sudan. So on Sunday night, at midnight, the message came from the IGAD office that, sorry, you cannot now go because the tension is reaching dangerous levels. So I'm here today. But conflict, what is fueling conflict? What is happening within governments that conflict is taking the better of us? It's having its toll on our societies, on our governments. We need to reflect on it. Last night, until midnight, the President of Kenya was chairing a joint virtual SADC and EAC meeting with the SADC heads of state and the East African Community heads of state. Why were they sitting and chairing a virtual meeting until midnight? Because conflict is consuming us. Conflict is consuming us. How do you explain heads of state of two important regional blocs, the East African Community and SADC, sitting until midnight, not to plan budgets, not to plan how to enhance free trade in the two economic regional blocs, not to plan how the Africa continental free trade will move, but sitting until midnight to try and resolve conflict. So, as we speak about open government again, we then need to ponder what more can be done within the framework of this conversation, so that we spend time and resources doing the right things, doing the more practical things for the better. And I'm not saying abating conflict is a bad thing. No, it's a good thing. But should we have been there in the first place? That's the question. Should we be putting ourselves, when we look at the Horn of Africa, the challenges, I don't have to, it's in the public domain. We are all seeing the conflict around us. The same holds for even other areas. We know the disruptions of the war in Europe and the war in the Middle East and the impact it's having on our economies. Supply chains have been disrupted and so forth. We also know that policies in the international arena are completely being overhauled. In loose terms, I would say that there's an earthquake that has taken place, and the tremors are beginning to go far and wide in all this. But open government will enable us to share experiences. Open government will help us to put more pressure on the leadership in our countries and our societies, so that they can hopefully be better as we move forward. So I thought I'd leave you with those two issues, so that in your conversation you can help us perhaps find more reasonable ways forward. So that's it. That's it. Thank you. And I will not speak again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. As you've seen, His Excellency is always thinking about these issues, and I think you've challenged us a little bit around the cost of democracy. As much as there's an imperative, but what are the realities? And maybe, Your Excellency, as you also continue to champion technology, this is where we start to think about how can technology actually help this. And I think in the room, the examples where technology has helped in public participation. And maybe we can double down on how we ensure that technology can help us in that particular piece, especially the sort of the positive side of generative artificial intelligence. The second part, of course, is this, and this is something we need to think about, Aiden, and I'm sure that the community here will start to think about, is yes, you could have these enclaves of peace and then have national action plans. But then you have the reality that you may have conflicts that are out of your borders, but also impact your country, and therefore you must, as a country itself, be agile enough to be able to respond to the neighbors, because this is who we are as the African community, and this is the uniqueness, I think, of Your Excellency, of who you see in this room. So I think, Your Excellency, we will take your 2 points as part of our conversation. I've really been writing down so that we can actually begin to discuss, especially the weighty issue is the time conflict takes out of development, that instead of us developing, then we are, yes, mitigating conflict, and conflict is one of those reasons that erodes democracy. And we've seen in this part of our world that you may have 10 years of democracy and 1 week of conflict, and that 1 week of conflict erodes 10 years of democracy and potentially derails a generation in future of that. So thank you so much, Your Excellency. I know you have a busy schedule. We will continue with the meeting, and I think you can leave at your pleasure.
I don't know if just some quick introduction of, and then I can connect.
So we have a list of speakers in this interactive session. Ministers, Excellencies, Ambassadors, you were prepped for this session, and the session was, I think, aptly framed by His Excellency, the Prime Cabinet Secretary. And I think, without even knowing, you've actually set the scene in the context of how are countries experiencing open government in their own way? What approaches are they having in terms of raising, for example, high-level political engagement? And you mentioned in this particular context that heads of state have been sitting and really engaged in assuring democracy and peace and security. But also the other part that I think you raised around the cost of democracy, I think it also speaks to resiliency of democracy, because then how do you have resiliency when the cost is high? And so I think part of the second question that their excellencies had been sort of briefed is how do we strengthen OGP resiliency? And then the third part is that how do we encourage ambitious commitments? Because the commitments we have, yes, are there, but you realize the challenge, and you mentioned kind of some of these challenges. The challenges are increasingly becoming bigger and greater. So it means we also need to raise our ambition in terms of commitments. And so without further ado, and maybe this could be the interaction piece, is we have a list of speakers. So I think we will begin with His Excellency Mathias Traore, Minister of Public Service for Labour and Social Protection for Burkina Faso. The floor is yours, Your Excellency. So
just to know them, that's, if I may have to leave, but I just wanted to know who is who.
Okay. My apologies. If we can have a round of...
Yeah, just a round of...
If we can have a round of introductions, maybe we start with Your Excellency, and then we'll just go down the line, and then we'll start on this side.
Merci, je suis Traoré Mathias. Je suis le ministre de la fonction publique, du travail et de la protection sociale du Burkina Faso. Merci.
Bokari Abdel Aziz Bao, Deputy Minister of Information and Civic Education, Sierra Leone.
Thank you, Your Excellency. My name is Nana Oye Bampo Ado. I'm Deputy Chief of Staff in charge of Finance and Administration for the Republic of Ghana.
Thank you, Your Excellency. My name is Johnny Takba, Deputy Minister for Administration at the Ministry of Information, Cultural Affairs and Tourism from Liberia.
Bonjour, Madame Benayed, époque par intérim du Maroc.
Bonjour Monsieur, je suis Eouma Chantal Angwa, conseiller technique du ministre du Commerce et de l'Industrie, qui est le point focal, et moi-même je suis le point de contact au GP Côte d'Ivoire.
Boa tarde, eu sou Paulo Fernandes, assessor do Ministro da Modernização de Estado e da Administração Pública de Cabo Verde e o ponto de contacto de Cabo Verde para o GP.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency. I'm Dr. Janet Banda. I'm the Deputy Secretary to the President and Cabinet in Malawi. I'm also the chairperson of the steering committee, OGB steering committee in Malawi. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency. Margaret Momo, Cabinet Secretary from Seychelles, and also point of contact for OGP.
Bonjour, c'est Dr. Alassane Gueye, directeur de la promotion de la bonne gouvernance au Sénégal au ministère de la Justice. Bonjour, c'est Dr. Alassane Gueye, directeur de la promotion de la bonne gouvernance au Sénégal au ministère de la Justice. Merci.
Good afternoon. My name is Anwar bin Youssef. I'm the ambassador of Tunisia to the Republic of Kenya.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency. My name is Alfred Msemna. I'm the Zambia's High Commissioner to Kenya, representing the Minister of Justice of the Republic of Zambia.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.